I'm Dilek Tuna and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Trump's claim on NATO's role in Afghanistan draws criticism from key allies. Ukraine and Russia held their first US-backed talks in Abu Dhabi, focusing on territorial disputes. And the US braces for one of the biggest winter storms of the decade. NATO unity has come under renewed scrutiny after comments by US President Donald Trump sparked backlash from key allies. Britain's Prime Minister and Prince Harry have spoken out, highlighting the cost paid by NATO forces in Afghanistan.
US President Donald Trump has drawn strong criticism from NATO allies after claiming they stayed a little back from the front lines during the war in Afghanistan. Speaking in an interview on Thursday, Trump questioned whether NATO members would come to the United States' defense if needed.
We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines. But we've been very good to Europe and to many other countries.
Trump's remarks prompted a strong response from Britain. Prime Minister Keir Starmer described the comments as insulting and frankly appalling, saying British troops fought and died alongside Americans in defence of shared values.
We have a very close relationship with the US, and that is important for our security, for our defence and our intelligence, and it's very important we maintain that relationship. But it is because of that relationship that we fought alongside the Americans for our values in Afghanistan. And it was in that context that people lost their lives or suffered terrible injuries, fighting for freedom, fighting with our allies for what we believe in.
Prince Harry also weighed in on Friday, calling for the sacrifices of NATO troops to be spoken about truthfully and with respect. The Duke of Sussex, who was twice deployed to Afghanistan, said he formed lifelong friendships there and lost friends in the conflict. NATO's Mutual Defence Clause, Article 5, states that an attack on one member is considered an attack on all. It has been invoked only once after the September 11th attacks, when allies joined US forces in Afghanistan for nearly 2 decades. According to the US Department of Defense, around 2,460 American troops were killed in the conflict. NATO allies also suffered heavy losses, among the highest per capita death rates in the alliance. British officials said the president was wrong to diminish NATO's role. More than 150,000 British troops served in Afghanistan, making the UK the second largest contributor after the United States. Trump's latest comments come as tensions rise between the US and Europe over his push to buy Greenland. Several European leaders, including Denmark, warned such a move could threaten NATO.
European leaders declared that the EU will stand strong against pressure following an emergency summit on Thursday. They insisted that Greenland's status and territorial integrity are not open to negotiation. Our correspondent William Denslow has more from Brussels.
At the conclusion of this emergency meeting of European leaders, Antonio Costa, the President of the European Council, said that Europe would not give in to any forms of coercion. This meeting was called after US President Donald Trump had threatened to impose duties from February on 8 European powers unless the United States was given control of Greenland, the semi-autonomous Danish territory. The message we heard from a number of European leaders is that Europe's unity, strength and resolve helped back down the US president and sent a strong message that that would essentially be a non-negotiable and that territorial integrity is absolutely vital going forward. There is also the other track that Europe has done more in recent days, including on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos to persuade US President Donald Trump that more is being done to achieve Arctic security. Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, has ploughed to ramp up the defensive posture, collective security in the Arctic region. That's something we also know that Denmark is keen on, saying that Denmark is pursuing a permanent NATO presence on Greenland. There are, though, huge questions going forward. On the issue of Greenland, it's being reported that the US wants sovereign military bases there. Mette Frederiksen, though, the Danish Prime Minister, speaking here in Brussels on Thursday, said that that was a red line and that conversations about sovereignty of Greenland would not be up for discussion. So going forward, big questions about what this exactly means, whether NATO can do enough to persuade the Trump administration, whether the EU can do enough to persuade the Trump administration that they are taking collective security seriously without the need for the US to have a permanent sovereignty in Greenland. And of course, there are these rattling issues about what these tariff threats have meant for the transatlantic relationship. We know that the European Parliament will continue its discussions on the US-EU trade agreement next week. And essentially, the message from European powers is that it has been a bruising few days for this incredibly vital relationship, but they believe that unity is the key to progress ties going forward. William Denslow, Frey News, Brussels.
Ukrainian and Russian negotiators met in Abu Dhabi on Friday for their first direct talks on a US-backed plan to end the nearly 4-year war, with territorial issues dominating the agenda.
Ukrainian and Russian envoys began their first trilateral talks with US mediators in Abu Dhabi since the war began. The talks are taking place as the United States increases pressure on Ukraine to advance toward a peace agreement with Russia. Participants include US envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, Russia's intelligence chief Igor Kostyukov, and senior Ukrainian officials, including Kirilo Budanov and Rustem Umerov. Ukrainian military leaders are expected to join on Saturday. President Volodymyr Zelensky said the territorial dispute is the core issue in the trilateral talks. He marked Russia must show readiness to end the war it started and added it was too early to draw conclusions.
This is important, as such trilateral meeting formats haven't happened for a long time. They are discussing the parameters for ending the war. By now, they should already have at least some answers from Russia. The key is that Russia must be ready to end this war, the one it itself started. Ukraine's positions are clear.
The talks follow Zelensky's meeting with US President Donald Trump at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where an agreement on US security guarantees for Ukraine was reportedly finalised and is awaiting a date and location for signing. A major obstacle remains Russian President Vladimir Putin's demand that Ukraine surrender the remaining 20% of the Donetsk region, a move Zelensky has rejected with little public support for concessions. The Abu Dhabi discussions come just hours after US envoy Steve Witkoff held late-night talks with Putin at the Kremlin. Kremlin officials said Russia's insistence on controlling all of Donbass is a very important condition and that a long-term settlement cannot be reached without resolving the territorial issue. State-run Russian media reported that the negotiations also covered possible buffer zones and monitoring mechanisms. Negotiations are expected to continue on Saturday.
Russia launched early morning attacks on Ukraine's largest cities, Kyiv and Kharkiv, killing at least one person and injuring more than 15. The strikes came just after the first day of US-backed talks in Abu Dhabi between Ukraine, Russia and the United States.
Ukraine's two largest cities, Kyiv and Kharkiv, were hit by Russian attacks early on Saturday. The latest attacks came as negotiators from Ukraine, Russia and the United States completed the first of 2 days of talks in the United Arab Emirates. In Kyiv, the night sky was lit up by flashes as explosions were heard across the city. Officials in the capital said one person was killed and 4 others were injured. The head of Kyiv's military administration reported strikes in at least 4 districts. In Kharkiv, near the Russian border, residential buildings were damaged and 11 people were injured. The city's mayor said the attack was carried out by Iranian-made Shahed drones, which hit several apartment buildings in 2 districts. Ukraine's Air Force said both drones and missiles were used in the assault on Kyiv. A medical facility was among the buildings damaged. Despite the ongoing negotiations, Russia has claimed control of several settlements in the Kharkiv, Donetsk and Zaporizhia regions. The Russian Ministry of Defense said its forces had taken 5 settlements over the past week. The ministry also claimed that Russian air defense systems intercepted 1,468 Ukrainian fixed-wing drones during the same period.
The United States Southern Command said it carried out a strike on a vessel in the Eastern Pacific on Friday, killing 2 people. The military released footage showing the alleged strike. In a post on the social media platform X, Southern Command said intelligence had confirmed the vessel was travelling along known narco-trafficking routes in the Eastern Pacific. Officials said the vessel was involved in drug trafficking operations. Southern Command added that 1 person survived the strike. The US is bracing for one of the most disruptive winter storms of the season. From the Central Plains to the East Coast, severe weather is expected to paralyse travel and test power networks. Here's more on the story.
A powerful winter storm is set to sweep across much of the United States this weekend, bringing heavy snow, ice and cold Arctic air from the Rockies to the East Coast. Snow began falling over parts of Oklahoma on Friday, offering an early glimpse of the severe conditions ahead. Oklahoma City could see up to 12 inches of snow, along with a layer of ice, before the weekend ends. The storm is expected to disrupt travel, damage power lines, and cause widespread power outages. Residents across the US rushed to prepare, stocking up on generators, firewood, and groceries.
Yeah, I'm picking up some salt because we're going to be having some really rough winter weather this weekend, and I gotta prep the site that I'm running to make sure that everybody's safe.
I think we're gonna get some snow, but I don't know how many inches. But me and my family are prepared for whatever's coming. So I just tell everybody, before it get bad, come to Guess Who Liquor Store and get all your stuff before it gets here.
We have lots of firewood already, so just make sure that we have that, and then the basics, canned food, easy to cook meals, chargers are charged, and everyone has everything they need to keep their electronics going at the house.
At least 14 states and Washington, D.C. had declared weather emergencies. Winter storm and extreme cold warnings are in effect from the southern Rockies to the mid-Atlantic and New England, affecting more than 200 million people.
7 people have died and 82 are missing after a landslide hit a village in Indonesia's West Java province, according to Indonesia's Disaster Mitigation Agency. The disaster struck amid heavy rain, which had been forecast by Indonesia's weather agency for the region. Parts of the village were buried in soil, with debris scattered across the area. Authorities said search and rescue efforts are ongoing and the number of missing people remains high. For the first time since the war began, the United States, Ukraine and Russia have held trilateral talks in Abu Dhabi, a diplomatic development being closely watched around the world. The discussions come as Moscow links any potential deal to Ukrainian concessions in the Donbass, something Kyiv has firmly rejected, raising doubts about how far these negotiations can realistically go. Let's bring in our guest, Nuno Wanon Martins, a political analyst from Brussels, Belgium. Nuno, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So this is the first time, rather significant here, first time Ukraine, Russia and the US have sat down together in a trilateral format to discuss ending the war. Why is this moment so important and what does it signal about diplomacy now?
Well, you have to read this moment after following the Davos conference, the World Economic Forum conference in Davos. You have to understand also what happened there to see that this trilateral meeting came exactly after the meeting between President Zelensky and President Trump. And it is a really push from President Trump to try to end the war, as he said he will be doing in the past. So that's what he's pushing for. And you also have to understand the people who are sitting on the table from both representations and from the US to see that the line, it's not more about the multilateral diplomacy, who, in my view, didn't achieve almost anything, but it's more about to see who can end the war and on which stakes this war can end, basically.
Okay, and Nuno, the US envoy and advisors joined these talks after recent engagements, including a conversation between Trump and Zelensky at Davos, as you mentioned earlier. How does US strategy shape these discussions, and can Washington balance pressure on both sides effectively?
So it's my view that the opinion and the goal of the US administration is to end the war as such, and to end the war that in certain ways, which is the more tricky thing, that neither parts will be vulnerable afterwards. I think that the Trump administration doesn't want to create a problem for the Russian president on one hand. On the other hand, what they are doing, either they are doing it on purpose or not, they are not including the Europeans, which have been giving leverage to the Ukrainians since the beginning of the war in this context, which means that I see this as basically, and you can also see by the composition of the delegations in Abu Dhabi, about the future of Ukraine as a country and about the future of Ukraine as natural resources provider to certain parts of the world.
Okay, now Nuno, I just want to make a pivot here also on US envoys' traffic for peace talks. President Donald Trump announced on Friday that Vice President J.D. Vance will visit Azerbaijan and Armenia in February. So he's set to visit the Caucasus next month to advance the Trump route for international peace and prosperity, building on the peace agreement signed in last August. How significant is this visit in terms of cementing US influence and ensuring the peace deal's durability in the South Caucasus?
In my view, this is exactly the point, because for many years, the US, especially since Obama, and also because of the outcome of the Iraqi war, the US had lost leverage in the global world regarding other superpowers like China, for instance. And putting the vice president going into the region, and after what happened, the peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia, it is basically to affirm that the US is a valid partner. The US is the superpower that you can count with. And it's also bringing, as I said, the strong influence of the US in world politics in a different view rather than the multilateral view. But what we can see from the past, and let's be honest, for so many decades, the multilateral view perspective did not bring success in bringing peace to the world. And this is why something had to be done. We can like it, we cannot dislike it. But the question is, at the end of the day, somehow we still need the US as a global actor, and we still need the US bringing solutions and bringing concrete results to the peace in the world. And this is why, in that sense, the vice president trip to the region is vital to show this and to show and to confirm that it's not only bringing peace, but it's a follow-up as well. Still, matters will go on, and the US will be there as well.
Okay, Nuno, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Thanks for your insight.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
Now we'll take a look at the major stories from the region. US President Donald Trump says Vice President J.D. Vance will visit Azerbaijan and Armenia in February as part of Washington's push to support regional peace. He announced the visit on his Truth Social account. Trump praised leaders in both countries for maintaining a peace agreement signed last August. US leader said the trip will focus on expanding strategic ties, including nuclear cooperation with Armenia and defence and technology deals with Azerbaijan. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has warned on Friday that Israel may be seeking an opportunity to strike Iran, saying such action could further destabilise the region. The warning follows a call between President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his Iranian counterpart, in which Erdogan emphasised Turkey's opposition to foreign intervention and support for Iran's peace and stability. The remarks come amid growing regional tensions and Iran's recent domestic unrest, the worst, in fact, since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. At least 5 people were killed and 10 injured when a blast struck a house during wedding celebrations in Dera Ismail Khan, northwestern Pakistan on Friday. The explosion occurred at the home of a local Taliban-affiliated committee chief. No group has claimed responsibility as the region continues to face militant attacks. The government has blamed the Afghan Taliban for sheltering militants, but Afghanistan denies these claims, saying Pakistan's security is an internal matter. During a press conference in Baku, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Vahid Jalalzadeh assessed the latest unrest in Iran and commented on US President Donald Trump's remarks about troop deployments in the Middle East, stressing that any military action would be met with a firm response and could have wider regional consequences. Our correspondent Aysel Ibrahimova reports from the ground.
Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Vahid Jalalzadeh held a press conference in Baku with Iran's ambassador to Azerbaijan, Mojtaba Demirchulu, saying the visit aimed to brief Azerbaijan's leadership on recent developments in Iran. Jalalzadeh said Tehran views the unrest as part of a broader confrontation following a 12-day war, claiming it followed a scenario prepared by the United States. He noted that the protests were initially driven by economic pressure voiced by traders in central Tehran. According to him, senior officials, including President Masoud Pezeshkian, met with protesters whose representatives were later invited to cabinet-level discussions and reported improved understanding with authorities. He also claimed the 8-9 January protests had similarities to ISIS-linked actions and said forensic evidence showed some fatal bullets were not fired by Iranian police. Commenting on the US President Donald Trump's statements about troop deployments, Jalalzadeh said Iran does not trust such remarks and warned that any attack would trigger stronger response, adding that Iran's armed forces are on heightened readiness. He stressed that military action against Iran would destabilize the region, a message regional states are conveying to Washington, and concluded that while Iran seeks dialogue, any aggression would have serious consequences.
Iran is facing renewed international scrutiny after its foreign minister said more than 3,000 people have been killed during months of unrest. Claims that are difficult to independently verify amid tight controls on information, and at the same time warnings from senior clerical figures about possible retaliation against the United States. Interests in the region are raising concerns about whether internal turmoil could spill beyond Iran's borders. Let's bring in our guest, Dr. Reza Talebi, author and journalist from Leipzig, Germany. Welcome to the program, Dr. Reza.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says more than 3,000 people have been killed during the unrest, but we also know that the United Nations Special Rapporteur is saying that the death toll may exceed 20,000 civilians. How credible are these figures, and what challenges remain in independently verifying casualty numbers inside Iran?
Abbas Araghchi, Iranian foreign minister, has made this claim, but reports coming from inside Iran suggest that the real numbers are much higher. The Iranian government has a long history of providing misleading or incomplete statistics, especially during crisis, and the public trust in these figures is extremely low. If Mr. Araghchi is sincere, there should be an independent investigation involving international bodies and the credible people inside the country. Otherwise, based on reports sent by citizens, even under severe internet restriction, the death toll appears for higher, and the scale of damage inflicted on Iranian society is very deep.
Doctor, a senior Iranian cleric has warned that Iran could target US investments in the region if attacked. Is that deterrence rhetoric or a signal that Tehran is preparing to widen the confrontation?
Yes, it's possible, but as you know, and we have a long time in Iran had a conflict with the United States and Israel, and as you know, the United States sent many military equipment to the Middle East, and maybe Iranian governments, such as the Iranian leadership, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, want to retaliate to the United States, and the United States based outside Iran. But now, in this situation, it's not impossible for the Iran, because Iran know the Trump administration, and the Trump administration has not any joke with the Iranian government. And now the United States cut the many Iranian proxy groups outside the Iran, and in Iran has not a legitimacy and has not a good relationship with his people, and maybe the United States want to attack to the Iran, maybe with the Israel, and it will be go to the horrible and the terrible situation inside the Iran and another country. And as you know, the Iranian government, such as the Iranian Revolution Guard and the Iranian leadership, has not any strategy, has not any tactic, just defends the Ali Khamenei and his administration inside the Iran, with killing the people inside, and the attack to the American and the United States benefit outside Iran.
At these 2 points together, Doctor, increasing casualties in Iran and threats from abroad and intervention threats, does this increase the risk of escalation beyond Iran, and what would neighbouring states and global powers be watching for right now?
Yes, it's possible because you know because of deep cultural, ethnic and religious overlap around the Iran. Any internal conflict or the foreign attack could quickly spread across the region. In such a scenario, the Islamic Republic would likely rely on proxy groups and another pressure tubes. Right now, the main effort is to push Khamenei toward negotiation. If they refuse, the alternative being discussed is war, but the war with Iran would not be short. The regime would try to make it long and tiring. And Iran's fragile economic and social condition make this risk even greater. We should also be realistic. Global power primarily pressure their own strategic interests, not the suffering of the Iranian people. A war imposed on Iran, whether by Khamenei or by the external actors, would only increase suffering and make a real domestic transition much harder, and it will be imposed to another country in neighboring of the Iran.
Okay. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Dr. Reza, we appreciate your your insight and contribution.
You're welcome. Have a nice day.
You're up to date with world news for the hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.